Hey, amongst YouTube, welcome back to a new video with Rams Fan YT. Today we are going to be going over my predictions for the festive period. It's great to be with you all for this festive time. There's a lot of football to go through, a lot of local derbies. There's still that tradition holding strong in certainly in lower leagues, non-league as well. Unfortunately, not so much in the Premier League, but we've got all of it to go through, and it's a bumper special one today because I've got obviously going on a holiday for some of the time between Christmas and New Year. So we're going right up until Christmas Eve, not New Year's Eve. So an extra long one today. So let's get straight into it with tonight's match: Arsenal versus Crystal Palace. Depending on how I'm feeling, I might do a live watch along for this one tonight, and also see if there's any support for it. That's only the live watch along. It was cut a bit short for some reason. Hoping this video is not in the same predicament. But yeah, this is a interesting one. EFL Cup quarter final game. I'm suspecting that Palace have had a bit of a tough time of fixture congestion at the moment. So I'm going to go with Arsenal to win this one. 1-0 to the Gunners. I think it's a bit of a boring then final four, but so be it. Manchester United versus Newcastle United is the only Boxing Day game in the Premier League at an 8 o'clock kickoff. But I'm sure that would be all the more to the joy of the Mancunians and the Geordies alike. And I think the glory is going to go to a United team up north. And it's going to be a Newcastle United. I think they're going to win 2-0. I think it seems to be turning maybe a bit of a corner around at the moment. Newcastle. They obviously had that disappointing defeat to Sunderland, but other than that, have been relatively all right. Yeah, you can never tell with Man United, can you, which team's going to turn up. On to the Championship Boxing Day fixtures, because we in the EFL like to keep things traditional. And it's Birmingham City hosting Derby County is what's starting us off today as an earlier kickoff. I'm not going to lie, as a Derby fan, I'm not overly confident. We're not bad at the moment. I just think we're having a few rocky displays. I wasn't convinced with us against Portsmouth, and although Birmingham's on a bad run of form, I think that's a bit deceptive. I think we're roughly around about the same ability so far this season. 2 points separating us, and I think Birmingham at St Andrews could win this one. 2-0 to the Blues, and I'm hoping we don't get the Christmas blues, and I'm wrong. Millwall versus Ipswich Town. Millwall have now dropped down into 6th with back-to-back defeats. I said it for a while now. I never thought that Millwall would be able to carry on the level of performances they have been going for so long and will drop out the playoffs. Ipswich, I suspect, if they have a really good run coming into the new year, could overtake Middlesbrough, certainly. I think they are going to be someone who's going to sneak into that automatic zone. And I think the Tractor Boys are going to win this one 4-0, taking an absolute beating at the Lions' Den. Coventry City versus Swansea City. Well, Coventry got a draw in their last match, and there's been a few injuries and suspensions to their back line. So defensively, a little bit weak coming into this fixture. So for that reason, I think maybe Swansea win this one. It's a rogue shout. I will be honest with you, but I'm going to go 2-1 to Swansea City, which would make it 4 wins in 5, which is not bad run of form at all. Which has sort of seen them lifted out that relegation scrap, which we're very much in danger of getting dragged into. Leicester City versus Watford. 10th versus 13th, but only a point separating them. But I would say that Watford are the better team at the moment. However, you can never rule out Leicester City, especially at home. And I do think the Foxes may win this one 2-0 to Leicester City, but it could really go either way. Middlesbrough versus Blackburn. We sort of alluded to it earlier that I think Middlesbrough have a couple of off days in them, really, and we saw that last time out. Maybe we're going to see it again on Boxing Day up against a Blackburn team, which we'll probably be expecting to beat, seeing they're down there in 20th. But I'm going to go with an unlikely 1-0 win to Rovers. Norwich City versus Charlton Athletic. Charlton did sink a bit, although they have stabilised in the last couple of games. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I suspect around about that 18th point place finish might more be expected of Charlton. But we've seen Norwich having a bit of a resurgence under Philip Clement, of a change of regime has certainly benefited the Canaries. Not to the point that they're out relegation zone yet, and still, I would say, will probably end up being relegated. But yeah, I think they could win this one quite big, actually. 4-1 to Norwich City. A bit of a shock. But they do score goals, Norwich. It's their defence, which is their issue. So, likes of Josh Sargent, is he still at? I believe he's still at kicking around at Norwich City. Let me just check. Is it Josh Sargent? He was at one point at Norwich. Yeah, he's still at Norwich and he's still whacking in the goals. 5 goals so far this season. Not obviously his best by any stretch, but he's still got a fair bit of a season to go. Anyway, on to Oxford United versus Southampton. Oxford United announcing today, I believe it was, that they had parted company with Gary Rowett. Whether that's a good move or not, I'm not too convinced at this moment in time, because he's a very experienced Championship coach. Who do they bring in? I'll let the comment section have an argument of a toss on that one. I think they could maybe dip in back for an old manager, maybe. That would be not totally unsurprising. I think somebody like who was it? Who was that guy who got them up? I'm losing my mind at the moment. Who was it? It was Des Buckingham. That was it. That's his name, Des Buckingham. And he's currently out at Al Khaloud. And could he potentially be tempted to come back away from Saudi Arabia? I don't know, but I think that may be their best option. But yeah, they're up against the Southampton team, which a bit uncertain at times this season. They still have a faint bit of hope that maybe they would be able to get playoffs. I think they'll maybe just finish outside it, but I think in this one could be interesting. A 1-1 draw at the Kassam. It's a very odd prediction, maybe, but we're going to go with it. Portsmouth versus Queen's Park Rangers. QPR, you never know which one's going to quite turn up on the day, but somehow they're in 7th, just outside the playoffs. But yeah, they're an odd team. They concede a heck of a lot of goals, but they score a lot as well. 32 goals scored is a very respectable figure. 34 goals conceded is not. So that sort of tells you where their weakness is and need to focus in January. We'll talk a bit more about January window once that comes around. Portsmouth, I think they might be relegated this season. I think Oxford will be able to leapfrog over Portsmouth at the moment because I think I'm not convinced fully at this Portsmouth side's capabilities. Scoring the second lowest amount of goals in the Championship at 18, just behind Sheffield Wednesday. It's not good enough at this stage of proceedings. However, maybe at Fratton Park on Boxing Day, they'll get something. 2-1 to Portsmouth. Stranger things have happened. Sheffield Wednesday versus Hull City. A Yorkshire derby in this one. And I'm going to be honest, Sheffield Wednesday's got to lose this one. I don't think it'll be embarrassment, but yeah, Hull have somehow managed to get themselves in the playoffs to the surprise of a great deal, many of us, to be honest. And they'll probably be hoping to make it 4 wins on the bounce. We're going to go 1-0 to the Tigers in this one. Yeah, the uncertainty continues around Sheffield Wednesday. Will it be Ashley? Will it be someone else? Stoke City versus Preston North End. Stoke have now dropped out of the playoffs after a bit of a bad run of form, but I do think they can maybe get back into it. But I think Preston have so far displayed themselves more than capably at this level to be competing for the playoffs, which I think was a surprise to everyone, including Preston North End fans. I'm going to go with a fairly even game on this one, a 0-0 draw, because as ever with Preston, they still love a fair few draws. That some things never change, do they? So yeah, we'll go with that. West Bromwich Albion versus Bristol City. Bristol City just outside the playoffs now by 2 points, but again, one of them ones that I could suspect could, if they get a bit of a run together, can get back into it very, very easily. However, they're in a bit of an off bit of form at the moment, and maybe it's a good time for West Brom to come. West Brom have done poorly by their standards this season. I think that's plain to see for everyone at the moment. Invariably, there's a ton of talks around about potentially getting rid of Ryan Mason, but somehow he's still in at the moment. I think maybe the Hawthorns a 2-0 win for the Baggies in this one. Wrexham versus Sheffield United. Wrexham mid-table in 15th, dropped off a bit, haven't they, the Welsh side. And they're up against a Sheffield United team which have had a bit of a resurgence, but that's slowed down maybe a bit in the last couple of weeks. But yeah, confident to say that Sheffield United were never going to be relegated, but maybe mid-table in this season. They've left it awfully late if they were to try and get playoffs, but you can never rule it out. 3-3 draw in this one, a very exciting draw on Boxing Day. AFC Wimbledon versus Stevenage. I think there's nothing more impressive than seeing Stevenage in the top four. And although they've dropped off a bit at the moment, there's still every possibility, and I think very likelihood, that they are going to be challenging for that automatic promotion spot. I think Cardiff, I'm going to have to say, are automatically going to win the title. I don't think anyone's going to be catching Cardiff. But I think that second place spot is open for anyone from Lincoln, Bradford, Stevenage, or Bolton. I don't necessarily think Stockport have it in them. But there's only 4 points separating second and to sixth. And Stevenage is one of them teams which is making that up at the moment. Up against a Wimbledon side who has dropped off a fair bit, I think that's fair to say. And at the moment, it's only looking like they're going to be finishing in the lower reaches of mid-table, which is still not bad for Wimbledon's standards. But yes, a very confident win for Stevenage. 5-1 we're going to go with there. Barnsley versus Mansfield Town. Barnsley is an odd one because they're not quite being able to compete to get into the playoffs at the moment. So I'm really, really not convinced that they're going to be able to make it because they just can't seem to string a run of form together this season. Mansfield have massively dropped off into relegation zone. I think Nigel Clough may be having a bit of jeopardy at the moment, but sometimes you need to hit rock bottom to be able to get back and being competitive. And I think Mansfield will win this one. It's just a surprise a lot of people. 2-1 to Mansfield Town, which, then that suddenly puts them in a position where they're back into mid-table because of how ridiculously close this bottom pack currently is. Blackpool versus Doncaster Rovers, a relegation 6-point, and it absolutely is, because either of these two teams could still get out of relegation zone. I suspect potentially Blackpool could. I'm not as convinced with Doncaster Rovers, who've lost 3 in a row now. But yeah, I think this could be maybe a bit of an even one. We're going to go with Blackpool. I've said Blackpool's had a resurgence, and they're at home as well. 2-0 to Blackpool in this one. Continuing their resurgence. A bit of a move away from Steve Bruce was maybe what was needed for the Seasiders, as they are now under Ian Evatt, and I do personally think he's a much better manager at this level. Bolton Wanderers versus Rotherham United. As I was saying earlier, I think Bolton could well get themselves into a title, well, not title, but second place challenging position, even though they're down in 6th. I think maybe a bit of reputation bias sneaking into there with Bolton, but certainly a big club historically. What's happened to them now is beyond me. They're up against Rotherham United, just across the Pennines, and through all them Greater Manchester towns. Rotherham have lost 3 in a row now and are actually, I'm going to say, 50-50 for relegation, to be honest. I'm not convinced on them at all at the moment. So we're going to go 1-0 to Bolton here. Bradford City versus Wigan Athletic. Bradford, another one of the ones which are doing really well this season, who was challenging for that automatic promotion zone, just outside in 3rd by a point. That was because of their loss last game. But yeah, I think Bradford can really hold their heads high and say they've done really well this season. But as ever, I'm always one of them people who aren't ever convinced that Bradford could keep on that run forever. And maybe Wigan, who have a decent enough run of form, not as great as maybe they should be, but a decent enough run of form. I can certainly see them being around about that 13th, 14th place mark from the end of the season. But yeah, 1-0 to Wigan Athletic. Why not? Burton Albion versus Northampton Town. Northampton have managed to push themselves up into 12th, which is really quite amazing, to be honest, considering at one stage how bad they looked. They've been yo-yoing up and down the league within this season already. Burton haven't won now in the last 4. It is being a bit more of a struggle, but it was always going to be a hard uphill battle for the Brewers. I suspect, I'm still not convinced that they won't be relegated this season. I said at the beginning that they were just going to stay up, and I'm hoping I'm right with that one. But 1-0 Northampton in this one. Cardiff City versus Exeter City. Exeter almost from relegation zone. If it wasn't for that win in their last game, they would be in the relegation zone. And quite a bit, actually. They've managed to, maybe they stabilised, but no, I'm not convinced. They're up against one of the strongest teams in the league, quite understandably as well. Cardiff going to demolish Exeter here. 6-1 at the Cardiff City Stadium. Can't see Exeter getting anything from this. Huddersfield Town for versus Port Vale. Now, although Huddersfield have been a bit poor, maybe in a few of their recent displays, they are just outside the playoffs, and there is a reason for that, and they are historically a giant of football, winning 3 league first division titles in a row back in the 1930s. But yes, Port Vale down at the bottom of the league. It's looking tough, really, for Port Vale at the moment. It was always going to be, but only 3 wins to their name. I'm going to say Huddersfield are going to win comprehensively. 4-0 to the Terriers. Great Christmas present for them. Luton Town versus Wycombe Wanderers. 8th versus 9th. This is going to be an interesting one because I think whoever wins this could go on a run of form and get the playoffs, and whoever loses this then fades away a bit. I suspect Wycombe will likely get playoffs coming into the season because of how good of a run of form they were just on. They have sort of slowed down a bit now, but and maybe for that reason at Kenilworth Road, Luton can win. I'm going this isolated game, the Hatters to win 2-0 as they don on their Santa hats. Peterborough United versus Leyton Orient. Leyton Orient, interesting one, how they've managed to now get themselves stabilised into a mid-table position. Very much suspect that's where they will stay come the end of the season. Maybe a place higher, you never know, but yeah, they're not as strong as they were last season, but still. Peterborough have won 3 in a row, which has mean they have now managed to get out of that relegation zone. They're still, I think, very much in precarious danger of slipping back into it. And I think Leyton Orient do win 3-1 in this one. Plymouth Argyle versus Reading. Plymouth, very similar situation, almost identical run of form of Peterborough, who have also managed to get themselves out of relegation zone. I'm pretty certain though they could get relegated, to be honest. There's something about this Plymouth team that I'm never quite been convinced of this season. They are up against Reading. They're both on 25 points, but I do think Reading take the win on this one. 4-2 to the Royals, which maybe they're going to be buoyed on by the royal speech. I hope you're enjoying how many Christmas puns I can put into one video. Stockport County versus Lincoln City. Interesting, second versus fifth. It's a very difficult one to edge out. 3 points separating these two teams. I think if Stockport win this, then we can scratch what I said about them not going to be in a challenge for second place. However, I think they could do this actually. They're at home. We'll go 3-2 to Stockport County. Why not? I think it'll be an entertaining game nevertheless. On to League 2. We've got Accrington Stanley versus Barrow. Couple of defeats now for Accrington Stanley. I think they're not going to be relegated, but yeah, around about that 17th place position, which may be a little bit disappointing for Accrington Stanley. I don't know. They've had a bit of a turbulent ride of late. Barrow just beneath them in 19th. Barrow on a horrendous run of form, and I still don't think they'll be relegated. I think they'll probably be around that 18th, 19th place. But yeah, I'm not convinced by what I'm seeing at the moment, and I'm going to go with a 1-0 Accrington Stanley win at the Wham Stadium. A very, very narrow win for the Lancastrians, or Lancashire sides. Bristol Rovers versus Bromley. Finally, Bristol Rovers developed a backbone to sack their manager, which was something that I was calling for about a couple of weeks. They've now appointed Steve Evans, which bit of a Marmite manager, I think that's fair to say, but he does know how to get results in this league. I'm still not convinced. I still think they could possibly be relegated. And I think they got a draw in their last one already, an instant bounce. And you know what? Even though Bromley are arguably looking for a top 3 finish, having done really well at the moment, I think it could be a draw here. 1-1 draw. Going to be a bit of a shock for you lot. Cheltenham Town versus Shrewsbury Town. Cheltenham in 18th have had a bit of a resurgence. They've managed to get themselves stabilised into 18th. A bit of away from relegation fears. But maybe they would have taken the eye off the ball a bit now that they seem to be a bit clear. But I don't know. They're up against a Shrewsbury team who are now, they had their resurgence and now crumbling a bit. 3 points in the last 5 games. Not the greatest run of form. I'm going to back Cheltenham to win this one. 2-0 were Rock Robins, where we go rocking along. Here we're Robins. So yeah, we're going to a win for Cheltenham. Chesterfield versus Notts County. 4th versus 7th. This will be a fascinating one if this ends up being a playoff fixture, won't it? These two have always been sort of competitive with each other at the top end. I really think crunching tackles galore, a great Boxing Day football, a 2-2 draw in one. Am I convinced that Chesterfield can make playoffs? I'm 50-50 still. I'm still not over how much damage has been caused in the past by Chesterfield, giving me false hope. Crawley Town versus Colchester United. Colchester an odd one because I think they can get the playoffs. I think out of the teams outside the playoffs at the moment, they're the ones that I'm going to be backing for being my dark horses to be able to get into the playoffs. 35 goals scored, very respectable, and also better defence than a lot of ones as well, with 26 goals conceded. If Colchester starting a consistent run of form, they're going to get playoffs. But when will that happen is a real question. Well, we're up against a Crawley team, which are slowly getting themselves more and more involved in a relegation scrap as the weeks go on. So we're going to have to back Colchester to win this one. 3-2 to the Essex-based side. Gillingham versus Cambridge United. Cambridge in 8th, Gillingham in 12th. Cambridge on the far superior run of form, it must be said. Can't remember last time Gillingham won. A lot of draws in that recent run of spell. Now at Priestfield, why not give them a Christmas present as well? We'll go 1-0 to Gillingham, but it could go quite easily the other way. Very similar teams, to be honest. Oh, bless me. Sorry about that. Grimsby Town versus Oldham Athletic. 14th versus 15th, two very mid-table teams, it must be said. Both could probably go a couple of places higher, but I can't see much beyond that. We'll go a 0-0 draw. Can't really pick a winner in this one. MK